Music in the Cafe, a Lukanette alternate universe month-long fanfiction. Each day will be based on a writing prompt from the Lukanette September 2019 calendar. I do not own this calendar. I will be linking the Tumblr post I found it in the description box below. Thank you for reading, listening, or watching. Please enjoy. Day 16. Wings/flight.
This is going to be a long trip, Luka grumbled to himself. His eyes flickered to the person next to him and he grimaced. If only they weren't the only ones going on this trip. That would make it a lot more bearable, but alas.
I love New York. It's such a hustle and bustle city, like New Orleans. I also live there. Did you know I was in their big Mardi Gras parade?
Lila chirped excitedly. Luka nodded politely but didn't say a word. Turning away from the babbling brunette, he sighed and rubbed his temples. Think about Marinette, think about Marinette, he chanted to himself.
In complete honesty, he was still on a sort of ecstasy high from Saturday. They had taken it slow, and now it was starting to all come together. It was crazy. They'd only known each other for about 7, almost 8 months, yet it felt like a lifetime. All the wonderful memories he would keep for the rest of his life. Luka raised his head a bit when they announced the boarding of first class. He was flying business, which was a comfort to him. He did not want to be too close to Lila. She may try something again. The idea of her trying to kiss him made him feel sick. He looked down on his phone, his fingers floating above the screen. His lips pulled into a line and his eyebrows scrunched together, the corners of his eyes pointed down. It was quite early, and Marinette would be sleeping at a time like this. But it was taking all of his self-control to not text her. She needed her sleep. That beautiful black-haired woman opened a cafe every day at the earliest of hours. Luka heard the attendants calling for boarding for business, and he got up from his seat and dragged his luggage to the gate. Passport and ticket, the attendant said. Luka dug into his pocket and gave her the small book and slip of paper. Thank you. Have a good flight, she said brightly, though Luka noticed that she was very tired of smiling so widely at so many people so early in the day. He nodded and walked down the way, hearing Lila crying out about being behind someone when her partner was on his way. Luka sighed annoyedly and slightly frowned. If Lila wanted to board at the same time as him, she would have gotten up earlier. Poor planning on her part. Marinette would never. He sped up his pace, trying to savor the silence, or at least lack of talking work partner with some questionable intentions. Yes, hi, this way, the attendant smiled and led him to a seat for the next 12 or some hours. Thank you, he said politely, and she nodded, walking off to help some other passenger. Luka inspected his seat. It was very nice, especially for business class. It was white, gray, and dark blue, very professional and neat-looking colors. Luckily, he was seated in the middle row, so he had an easy exit, and the seats were roomy enough that Lila didn't have any reason to touch him. I wonder what movies they have, he wondered to himself. Some of the other passengers had begun to mess around with the buttons and adjustments, others were sleeping soundly, and few were watching movies or shows. Luka pulled out his phone and checked if he had a playlist downloaded, and thankfully, it was. He was not about to go 12 hours without music or Marinette with Lila. At least with headphones in, Lila could be tuned out, or maybe she'd get the hint and stop flapping her mouth. Before Lila could come and start a conversation, Luka plugged in his headphones and began to watch a random movie. After 20 minutes, Luka felt someone sit next to him and settle themselves in. He fought the urge to look, even in his peripheral vision. Any eye contact with Lila would probably launch into some excited rant of some sort. Not that he'd be rude, he'd listen and all, but There were enough hours in the flight that he wanted some peace at least to start it off with. An hour later, the plane had taken flight, and it was now leveling into the sky. Thank goodness Lila hadn't tried to strike up a conversation, but Luka did hear soft snoring, so he assumed she'd fallen asleep. He didn't blame her. They had to wake up early for the flight and boarding time. Luka sighed. The movie was good, but it didn't quite interest him. So to keep himself busy, he reached into the carry-on bag he brought and pulled out a black songwriting book. He had a bunch of unwritten songs, but there was no inspiration for them. A while later, Luka felt a tap on his hand and he sighed and put on a polite smile. "Oh, honey, can you—" "Oh, my!" Luka's eyes widened and the woman's hands flew to her mouth. "Oh, dear, I'm so sorry," she cried. Okay, one thing's for sure. This woman was not Lila. For one, she had short, curly blonde hair up in a crazy top knot. And two, he didn't know who she was. "I'm sorry. I thought you were my client," she apologized. Luka shook his head and gave her a forgiving smile. "No, it's okay. I thought you were my work partner. I'm surprised me and her got split up," he said. The woman nodded in agreement. "I did too. I guess I shouldn't have assumed," she said sheepishly. Luka shook his head and put his hood down. "I think a lot of people wear jackets and hoodies, so it's not your fault," he smiled. The blonde laughed slightly. "I shouldn't have assumed anyways. If you like, your work partner and I can switch seats for the ride," she offered. Luka shook his head. Nope, he was perfectly fine with a stranger. "No, it's okay," he said. A small understanding smile made its way on the woman's face. "Ah, are there one of those people? The nightmare work partners?" she asked. Luka nodded his head slightly. "I don't mean to undermine her or anything, but she has a talkative personality that I don't quite work well with," he explained. The woman nodded her head. "I'm Mavis, by the way," she said with a smile and hand out. "Luka." He shook her hand. "That's understandable. Sometimes talkative people give me a headache," Mavis said. After a few moments of silence, Mavis spoke again. "Hopefully I won't talk your ears off during the flight." Luka shook his head. "I doubt it. How come you're flying to New York?" he asked. "Oh, I'm from New York. One of my clients were in Paris, so I was sent to pick them up. I guess someone decided it would be a good idea to separate us." Mavis shook her head and laughed at the end. Luka had to agree with her. If you had a client, or in his case work partner, you would probably want them to stick together. But in this case, being away from Lila for a couple hours wasn't awful as terrible as it was to say that. "What are you flying for?" the woman asked. Luka explained that he was going for an event. "Oh, event planning is quite a tedious thing, especially when the clients are super picky about every little detail," Mavis exclaimed. "Yes, but when it's perfect, it's quite rewarding to see their face light up in awe and happiness," he explained. "I'm sure it is. I will ask, though, what degree did you get for events planning?" Mavis asked. Luka shook his head. "Oh, no, I didn't originally want to be an event planner. I went to school for performance art music. I needed a job and event planning was open," he explained. At that, Mavis's eyes began to shimmer, and she had a slight smirk on her face like she'd gotten a really good idea. "Really?" She leaned back in her seat. "What do you study?" she asked. "Guitar. I've been just playing a couple of gigs, but it's not enough to quit my day job." Mavis raised a brow and folded her hands in her lap. "Would you," she started, "be interested in making it your day job?" That's when Luka raised his eyebrows. His eyes widened slightly in interest. "I'd like to make it that," he said. At that, the blonde woman reached into her large bag and pulled out a black binder, then faced him again. "As luck may have it, I might be able to help you.
She opened the binder to display a big logo and kept flipping through until landing on a page that she was probably looking for. I work for a record studio, and my job is to find new artists, train them, and get them into the industry. I normally don't offer it up, but if you're going to be my flight partner for the next 12 or so hours, and judging by the fact you got into a music school and have a degree in music, I'll take the gamble that you're good. Luka was stunned and didn't say a word. This opportunity was one of a lifetime. It was the one he was waiting for, and it just fell into his lap. No way was he about to let it get away. But at the same time, things like this would often shake people's lives up. Would he have to live in New York or just be trained there? Marinette was back home in Paris, and he didn't want to leave her. Maybe she'd come with? There was a lot of maybes on the table. I think I'm interested, he said, keeping the conversation open. Do you have any demos? Mavis asked. Her voice was immediately given a formal tone. Clearly, she was in professional mode. I do. Luka took out his phone and a pair of earbuds, clicking around until he found the folder. He handed his phone to Mavis, and she listened to them. You have got talent, she said, handing back Luka's stuff to him. He smiled and thanked her for the compliment. I'm going to need an email, your full name, and number, she said. A pen was now poised over the binder, and Luka told her his information. In his head, he noted that it might be time to let go of his agent and recommend him to some new graduates. Or maybe Sass. His agent did a lot of Broadway, and Sass could definitely benefit from a guy with an in. Thank you so much for bearing with the impromptu meeting. Mavis laughed, her voice and expression and posture all relaxed when her black binder was put back away. Well, you gave me an offer that could really change my life and help me achieve my dream, he said with a smile. We should switch from the walk to the casual talk. Tell me about your life. It's nice to get to know someone, and not just because I like to know my clients. So that's what they did. Mavis was a nice person. She was in her mid-30s and a complete hustler. She said she was completely married to her work and devoted to her clients. The blonde stated that she was content and didn't need a marriage to fulfill her life. Apparently, Mavis had grown up in New York, which made sense because Luka could hear a slight accent. Unlike when he talked to Lila, Mavis asked him about his life and allowed him to talk. Luka told her about university and work, and a little bit about his family. He told her about Marinette and how she was more or less his girlfriend. I respect that. Most people think that you have to jump into a relationship, even when they're older, Mavis commented. Yeah, it works for us, Luka smiled, thinking fondly about Marinette. I do want to tell you about this, and I don't want to make it seem like a brush-away comment either. Mavis said. Her voice was now getting serious. Luka nodded, giving her way to continue. Being a star, getting into the industry, is going to be a big change. For one, training in New York is mandatory for the company, and it's a 6-month-long period. And in general, we prefer you to stay living in New York while you work with us. You have a lot in your life, commitments, Marinette and her commitments. Your friends and family, it's a lot to give up, and I don't want you to give them up if you don't want to. I may be an agent, but that doesn't mean I'm going to con you into working with me. My clients are my #1 priority. When you fly back to Paris, I want you to talk it over with everyone that you see and interact with in a positive manner. And you have all the time in the world to figure it out. While you are in New York, if you're free, you can come check out one of our buildings and see how we work. It might help your decision. Anytime you or Marinette want to fly over and see everything, just let me know. I'll get you a flight over and back. I'm not just going to pull you in blind. That's why I'm letting you know now. No pressure to say yes. I'll join your studio, and no guilt if you say no. Right now, you need to gather your information, and whatever way I can help, I will, Mavis said. Luka smiled at her in appreciation.
He had heard of many horror stories about companies working their stars too hard. It was a comfort that Mavis was an agent that cared and was going to be open about her studio. "Thank you for telling me," he said, and she nodded. "Of course. Now tell me more about Marinette."